Arlington. It's, I can't say that it really prospered right away, but all kinds of people, there were 2 or 3 little communities that shut down to move down next to it. Very quickly, you end up with, I think, 4 or 5 cotton gins and a grist mill and 4 or 5 saloons, because, once you make money, you have to figure out a way to drink it up. They also, and so this little Center for Agriculture is one of our earliest brands. Along the way, it was around 1892, they decided to put a well in the middle of it. And so they dug a well, and if they had just kept drilling past this initial level of water, they would have hit drinkable stuff, but they didn't. They hit a gusher of mineralized water that was under so much pressure that it poured out and poured thousands of gallons going up and down the street, and then it would dry. It was mineral water. It would dry in this white, pasty kind of color, and then as the wind blew, these were all dirt streets, as the wind blew, this white powder would cover the fences and the dogs and the houses and the rooftops and all that. And then so you would come into this Arlington, and you would arrive and you would see this ghostly white all town. You remember the Wizard of Oz? The first half of the movie is black and white, and then something happens and it explodes into color. Well, Arlington was like that in the rain. It's all of a sudden, if you have a rain, all of a sudden, oh, that house was yellow. That dog there, look at him. He's black. He's got brown and white spots. So, but we actually marketed this stuff. We had a couple of we call them sanitariums back then, where you would come and drink the stuff and bathe in it and cook yourself in it. And we also made something called Arlington Crystals, which was like Epsom salts, and which we would probably still be doing if the Food and Drug Administration said you can sell it all you like, you just can't claim any medical benefits to it. But they actually made Arlington Crystals up until the 1950s. It was kind of one of our early browns, and eventually the people who did the crystals got out of the crystal business and got into the Pontiac business and then the Honda business. And those of you who've been around a while remember Luke. Well, the Luke family, they're the ones that developed the old Arlington crystal business and then the Honda business. When those first little Hondas came out, they actually had kind of like motorcycle engines in them. And I went down to take a look at one, and I drove it around, tiny little car. And the guy, I said, well, I like it. He said, well, son, he says, it'd be all right to drive that little car around town. He said, but son, what you need is a Pontiac. And then it wasn't too long before they were selling a lot more Hondas, I guess, than they were Pontiacs. The same year, by the way, or 10 years after they drilled the well, a Nazareth minister named Upchurch came to town here. Upchurch had been down working in Waco, and he'd worked the red light districts. And one of the things he had noticed is that because we're in the Bible Belt and everything else, that often when a young woman would become pregnant, minus the husband, that this threw her into disgrace, and she'd be thrown out of the family. And next thing you know is they're women of the night. And he thought that if he could just do something, help them with their children, teach them to learn a trade, that then they could keep their children and avoid this life of sin. So he actually created something called the Baraka Home for erring girls. I think industrial home for erring girls. And there's still a little Baraka cemetery here.
It's one of those parks by UTA.
It's right, just immediately
North of Mitchell.
North of Doug Russell Park. In fact, Doug Russell Park and across the street were where the Baraka Home were. UTA has it all now. And the home ran for more than 30 years. I think eventually in the 30s it became an orphanage or something. I used to get calls from people they would hem-haw around, well, maybe I think my aunt was born there, and I'm trying to get data, and I can't find out. Like that. I said, I found out all the records for the Baraka Home are in the special collections, 6th floor, UTA library. All you gotta do is just go up there, and you can see if your aunt was there, usually them that are looking to find their home. But for a very long time, Arlington was famous for the place. Susie's in a family way. Where'd she go? Well, she's in Arlington. She went to Arlington. So that was kind of our image here, the place where husbandless, pregnant girls went. Show that, and so show up. And by the way, back then the train actually stopped in Arlington, so they would come in typically on the train. By the way, 1902 is the same year that they started running the interurban electric trolley from here. Most of you know about the electric trolley, but the trolley ran from Sherman Denison through Dallas all the way down to Waco, and from Dallas right through the middle of Arlington, right down Abram Street today is where the track went. In fact, when they were doing some renovations on Abram that they're working now, they found some more track that they hadn't picked up. Most of it got picked up and used for scrap during World War II. But it really actually, if you think about before 1902, before the interurban, before the car became so common, it was, if you wanted to take a buggy ride to downtown Fort Worth, well, that's 5 or 6 hours over there, 5 or 6 hours back. So basically, it's an overnight trip. You get on the interurban, 50, 55, 60 miles an hour. You're there, even with 2 or 3 stops, in a few minutes. So a lot of salesmen began to relocate to Arlington because, by the way, I guess they became something like the first commuting workers, because that put them in the middle. And they could grab the interurban and go to Dallas, go to Waco, and by the interurban here, went from Fort Worth all the way down to Cleveland.
You're talking about the trolley, right?
It's an electric trolley, yes.
And it went 60 miles an hour?
60 miles an hour, yes, indeed.
Wow. Why
In
did
fact-
they get rid of it?
Well, General Motors actually ran a campaign where they offered discounts, and they talked about the flexibility of auto lines and so forth, and offered all kinds of deals. And so basically, the big auto dealers conspired. When I was a kid, you could still go to Fort Worth and see electric trolleys with the sparkling wires. Boy, I love those things, booming around. I think it's funny is that now they're bringing back trolley-looking things, although they don't really like to have them electric because, a bus is flexible, it can go anywhere. But when you're on rails, you got power lines, you're pretty much limited. But you're right, if we could have a 60-mile-an-hour trolley going to downtown Dallas today, or downtown Fort Worth, wouldn't that be great? I know. Progress, Mark Twain once said that progress is good unless it goes on too long. And so I think that's really kind of what happened to the trolley. Things kind of went on too long, and you get rid of it before that. But it was not governmental, it was private. This is before it sort of became standard operating procedure for mass transit to be basically supplemented, mostly paid for by government. But so trolley made money for a while, and actually it was direct current as opposed to the alternating current that we have now. And there, just briefly, the has nothing to do with branding, but just briefly, they would stop the trolleys at night, but they couldn't shut the electric generating plant down. It was too difficult to set back up. So they sold electricity to Arlington at night. So about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, the power would come on and you could run electric lights. And we had like direct current for quite some time before they finally switched to alternating stuff. The power plant for that was originally right there at Hanley. And then that was eventually acquired by Texas Electric and whoever owns all that stuff now. And over time, of course, converted to alternating current. So at any rate, you can see that Arlington's early brand was quite different from what it is now. By the late 1920s, we had some other developments that occurred that changed Arlington's brand really in a more colorful direction, which is that there was a guy named W.T. Wagoner, and he had a huge ranch out by Vernon, which basically just recently been sold. But he had a 6,000-acre ranch here where he kept his thoroughbred horses. He liked to be in town. And so he loved horse racing, he loved thoroughbreds. And so in 1929, he built a racetrack here called Onyx Downs. It's originally was 10,000 people, then eventually expanded to 25,000. In the early 1930s, he went down to the legislature. They said he took a suitcase full of cash with him. And when the legislative session was over, the suitcase was empty. But lo and behold, the legislature had approved pari-mutuel betting. Ma Ferguson was the governor then. You know, she was elected after her husband was impeached. The only governor in Texas history to be impeached. So, but Arlington Downs raced during the day. We got all these high rollers coming into town. People, Will Rogers and the vice president, Nance, had a favorite box here. So that during the day, so that you had these high rollers. So what happened? We had a couple of guys that Fred Browning, who was basically a card shark gambler from Fort Worth, and his pal Benny the Cowboy Binion, who bought a chicken place out on the Bankhead Highway, Division Street, lifted it off of its foundation, dug a giant hole for a casino underneath it, and then began to operate quite an illegal casino that operated really up until almost 1950. Plus, even though slot machines weren't legal at the time, they were all over town. So you could stop anywhere in Arlington, any service station, any little place, and play a few slots. You could go to the racetrack, bet on the ponies all day. Wagoner had an ambition to make. He created something called the Texas Derby. He wanted to compete with the Triple Crown, you know, Kentucky Derby, Belmont, all that. So he started a very high dollar race here. We probably still would have horse racing here, but he died. And the legislature was so disappointed when he didn't show up with another suitcase full of cash that plus we're in the middle of the Depression, and even though the racetrack was quite prosperous, and
They had slot machines up until about 1950?
Yes. Even early 50s, you had slot machines. It's funny that the Attorney General of Texas collected tens of thousands of slot machines and put them to the deepest part of Galveston Bay, and there are still slot machine reefs out there that fish are living in today based on slot machines. Yeah, I remember as a kid coming up at Springtown and stopping, and I was putting nickels in a slot machine. I was 5 or something like that, so I would have been, I guess, I'm 75 now, so that would have been 1950 or so. And the guy told my dad, "Hey, that boy is not supposed to be playing slots." My dad said, "He's okay." The guy said, "Okay." So I'm putting nickels in that thing. And sometimes you won. So, but for this little brief shining period from 29 to 1950, Arlington was sort of Las Vegas before Las Vegas was around. In fact, Binion eventually took his money, several $1 million that he made in Arlington, and opened one of the first places in Vegas, the Horseshoe. And most of his family, the Binion boys, are still in business with casinos, but they moved most of their stuff to Louisiana or Mississippi. So most of those casinos that you go now in those places are still being run by the Binions. So this wide open gambling with a town with 500 unwed women with children was made Arlington quite a unique place, really from the early 1900s up through 1950. Things really began to change brand-wise around here when Tommy Vandergriff was elected mayor. He was his father owned the local Buick and Chevrolet dealerships. Tommy was born here. Hooker had opened his dealerships here when he'd had a falling out with his dad in Carrollton, who ran a dealership there. So they had the dealerships here. Tom went off to Southern California, and when he came back, he'd hoped to get a job in radio, TV. Didn't work out. Came back to work for his dad. His dad gave him a job, but didn't give him anything to do. So he decided he would, first he ran for the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He was elected to that. And then he decided, he had heard a rumor that General Motors wanted to build a plant in the South. At the time,